Welcome friends to Farm Fresh Designs 59. If you're new to my channel, welcome. And also make sure you wait till the end for a special surprise. My first project today, I'm using some paper from Decoupage Central, and I'll make sure to link it in the description box below. And this paper is approximately 11.5 by 16.5. So I'm just using my water pen and I'm going around the edges to get that white off of the edge. And when I use that water pen, it softens up that decoupage paper, and that way it makes it really easy to just tear it off. And if you don't have a water pen, you can just take a paintbrush and dip it in water, and that works the same way. Now this board is something that I thrifted quite some time ago, and it's a really large cutting board. And I made sure that there were no oil stains on it, and I painted it with Rust-Oleum chiffon cream. Now I wanted some extra room on this board, so I folded it up down at the bottom, and I used my water pen to tear that off so that I would have some extra room. And I'm just using Mod Podge, and I put a little bit down and fold that paper down, and I use a piece of cellophane wrap to smooth out the wrinkles, and then I fold it up and put a little bit more glue down, and then just work my way all the way down the board. So I want to make it fancy around this decoupage paper. So the first mold that I get out is my IOD Old Christmas Tree mold, which is a mold that came out this past Christmas. So not only does it have a large Christmas tree on this particular mold, but it also has corner pieces that are symmetrical. So I put cornstarch in the mold, and then I use DOS air dry clay and push it down with my thumb because the IOD molds have a micro rim on it. But I like to also go back with an old credit card or a gift card and just smooth out those edges. Now with these corner pieces, I make 4 of them. And I go ahead and get them made up, and then I use Titebond Thick and Quick, and I spread it out with just this little silicone stick. And then I'll flip it over and put these on the 4 corners of this particular picture. So when I first put my molds down, I like to just very gently go around the edges of that mold just to make sure that they're sticking to the project really well. But just use a very gentle touch so that you won't mess up any of the details on the mold. Now there's going to be spaces between these 4 trim pieces, so I'll be using another mold to put between that. Now the next mold that I'm going to be using is called the Juliette mold, and it's a large mold, and it has all of these continuous roses and leaves and little branches. And so you don't have to make up the entire mold. You can sort of pick and choose which ones that you want. So once again, you just put the cornstarch in it and the air dry clay, and then I just smooth it out. So when I make these molds, I know that there's going to be some little pieces that I might need to kind of pull off. And when I decide what I'm going to put up there, then once again, I just use that little credit card or gift card to just kind of cut those little extra pieces off. And I just kind of play with it here and there just to see what looks right. And then I'm going to be putting molds from this Juliette mold on the 2 sides and up at the top, because I'm going to be putting something else different down at the bottom. And this takes a pretty good while because I just want to make sure that some of those roses aren't sticking over too much onto that cow. So I just kind of play with it just a little bit, and then at the end you'll be able to see which particular roses I put on those 3 sides. But once again, there's even parts of it that are the little leaves that I don't really want on there. So I just use that little card to cut it off. Now once I get all of those pieces put on, then this is actually one of the labels from Conservatory Labels, which is one of the new IOD molds, and I've made it up with resin, and I've had it just kind of in my little stash of resin molds. And it's the larger one that's more of an oval, and it's real dainty. But there's still just a little bit of space down at the bottom, So on this old Christmas tree mold, there's just a little tiny portion that would be a trim piece. So I just make one of them, and I just use that card to cut it in half, and I put that between the corner piece and the Conservatory label, and it's just enough to fill in that extra little spot so that I don't have any gaps in my molds. Now, I could have done this before, but I really wasn't sure exactly, where I wanted all of these pieces to be. So I just took my IOD vintage textures and I went around and put a little bit of crackle finish here and there. So I painted my molds with Rust-Oleum chiffon cream, and then once all of it dried, I'm using Dixie Belle Voodoo Gel Stain in the color Natural, and that just puts all that detail in all of those molds. That gel just kind of sinks into it, and then I'm going to be wiping it back with a baby wipe, and then that gel stain is going to kind of sink down in the bottom so that when I wipe it back, that's when you're going to see all of the beautiful detail. And then it also just kind of finishes it off really well. And I don't like to go over the entire piece and put Voodoo Gel Stain. I like to just do a little portion of it and then wipe it back, and then I go and do another portion of it, because if you leave that gel stain on too long, then it's going to be hard to pull it off. And one of the things that I like to do is when I put my molds on, after they've set up about 10 or 15 minutes, I like to go back and paint them just with a really soft bristle brush. Some people don't like to do that. Now what I need to do is I need to give my cow a name, but I didn't want to print right onto that mold just in case I messed up. So this is just some rice paper that I had, and I'm using the IOD Apothecary Labels, and I'm using one of the alphabets, and I'm spelling out the word Daisy. So I'm going to name my cow Daisy. So I put it on one of my thin mounts, and then I use the IOD black ink to stamp it. And then when I put it on that rice paper, then I'm going to go and I'm just going to tear that little piece that has the word on it. I'm going to tear all around it, and then I'm going to add that to that little label. And that ink sets up really quick, and it's permanent ink. But I did wait just a little while before I put it on. And so I'm just using some Pent Art decoupage varnish and glue to put that rice paper down. And then when I do, because that rice paper is sort of clear, then it just kind of blends into the background and you don't see it. So here's the finished project. What do you think? So if you're enjoying the video today, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel and become part of our family. So here's my next project. So this is actually a board that I've had for a while, and it has an arch shape to it. So I've been saving it for just the right project. So I painted it with Rust-Oleum linen white chalk paint, and then I'm using the IOD Kindest Regards stamp in stone gray ink just to kind of give it a little bit of extra touch in the back. Now this is a stencil that I've used, and I've used it before, and it's that harlequin shape. And I'm using Redesign with Prima chalk paste, and this particular color is called English Cottage. And so once I get that all dry, and when I pull that stencil up, it's kind of thick, so I have to let it dry for a day or so. Then I pull out my mold, and it's called the Swags mold. And this is just a large kind of little swag, and it's got roses on it. So I make one large swag, and I put that down with Titebond Thick and Quick. So now in the middle of it, I'm going to be using my IOD Frames 2 mold. And this is that really large ornate frame, and I just think it's so pretty. So I put that down. And now the next mold that I'm going to be putting just right down at the bottom is the IOD Trimmings I mold. And this one, I love it because it's real dainty and it's got sort of a scallop shape to it, but maybe not. And it's got just like little flowers within that little scallop. And I just think it's so pretty. So I'll leave a little bit of space down at the bottom. And so this is actually a stamp, and I believe it's redesigned with Prima IC Paris, and it's just some script. So I only want to use part of it, so I tape it off, the part that I don't want, and then I stamp it. And then after I stamped it, I realized I stamped the wording upside down, but it was too late, so I thought, well, nobody's really going to look at it that close. So this is actually some graphics that I bought off of Etsy because I was wanting something blue. And this one in particular is a bird. And I'll share that link below. So I printed it off on my printer at home, and I put that graphic of the bird inside of that frame. And then some of the little flowers that went along with it, I put those down at the bottom up underneath that trimmings mold. So I painted all of those molds with Rust-Oleum linen white chalk paint. And once that was dry, then I went back with the gold metallic paint. But it was still just a little bit too shiny. So then I went back with Dixie Belle brown wax, and I pushed that wax kind of into those molds. And then I'm going to wipe it back, and that kind of takes off that glare of that gold. And then I still wasn't really happy with it, so then I found some black wax that I had, so I put that on top of it, and then I liked it a little bit more. And then I forgot to tell you that I used a couple more molds. I used the butterfly mold from the IOD Monarch mold, and there's a really old IOD mold, and it's called Cherub, and it's got some angels on it, but I like the flowers that went along with it because they mimicked the flower in the graphics. And I put those on, and I just did it in the same way, painted them with gold and put the black wax on it. So let's do something easy. This is just a little wood tag, and I bought it in a pack of several off of Amazon, and I'm just painting it with Rust-Oleum linen white chalk paint. And this is just a graphic that I got from Decoupage Central. And I put that on in the same way. And then up at the top, I'm using a mold that I already had made up. And it was the Conservatory Labels, which is actually the mold. And I had just a little graphic of a bee that I put on it after, I got it all painted. And then I wanted to bring out the blue in that paper. So this is just some Dixie Belle paint, and the color is dusty blue because that's the same color of the flowers that are in the print. So I just go all around the edges. And one of the things that I thought about is, instead of putting ribbon in it and just maybe possibly hanging it, if you didn't want to hang it particularly, you could put a mold on top of that little hole, and then it could be just a little shelf sitter. So what do you think about this very simple but very pretty spring little tag? And you can hang it from a doorknob or maybe from the little switch on a light, but I just think it's really sweet. Okay, here is my surprise project at the end that was not in the thumbnail picture. So this is a really large sign that I bought at a thrift shop, and I painted it with Rust-Oleum chiffon cream. And then look at this beautiful decoupage paper. Oh, I was so excited when John L. sent it to me, and it's from Decoupage Central. So once again, all I did was just put it down with Mod Podge, and I worked my way down. But if you'll notice, I used that vintage texture stamp, and I just went around the edges of it before I even put the decoupage paper down. So I wanted to put a mold on it, and I really struggled with this one because I don't want to take away from the beautiful picture that's in this and the special meaning that it has. But I wanted to put something on it, so I used the IOD Lock and Key mold, and this is actually one of the locks, but it's one that's not too ornate. And initially, I was going to put one on either side of the picture, but I ended up just putting it up at the top. Now, in my last video, I had 2 little patriotic plaques that I did, and y'all just all loved them so much. So when Jonelle sent me this paper, I sort of rushed to get this picture finished. And so even before it dries, like I said before, I just go ahead and put some Rust-Oleum chiffon cream on, and the brush has really soft bristles because I don't want to mess up any of the detail on this really pretty mold. So I wanted to put a saying on this particular paper, and my husband helped to kind of jog my memory. And so I'm going to be putting some wordage that says, all gave some and some gave all. And I initially was going to put it somewhere on top of the picture, but I just couldn't make it look right. So I decided that I would put it down at the bottom. And I'm using the IOD Apothecary Labels for the alphabet. So let me show you what I did. I took one of my other thin mounts that has the grids on it, and I laid that down on the silicone mat. And then I took my rice paper and I laid that on top, kind of even with the edges, and I taped it down. And because this saying was kind of long, then I really just wanted it to do letter by letter so that I could get those letters just a little bit closer. And so when I'm doing this, I'm working really hard to make sure that that little grid line that's up underneath the rice paper, I stay on the same line just to keep it straight. And that was pretty hard to do. It took me a pretty good while to get this done because I didn't want any of the words to, kind of go a little bit crooked. And then I'm using the IOD black ink because I want to make sure that this word kind of comes out and stands out just a little bit. Now this stamp set has been really popular. It has 4 different fonts for the alphabet, but now all of the letters are still really small. But what IOD did was on these particular stamps, they made them in color, so you're less likely to lose them. Because before in the past, all of the stamps have just been clear, but with these being so small, you want to be careful and not lose any of them. So with the color in the stamps, that helps a whole bunch. So I get the little saying, all stamped, and I put that down and let it dry really well. And then I go back with my Dixie Belle Voodoo Gel Stain in Natural, and I go back over those little molds that I've made, and also all around the edges, just because I don't want even the chiffon cream to be just a little bit stark. It just softens it up so much. And then I also go around the edges of the sign. So if you have somebody in your family or one of your friends that has been in service, this is such a wonderful picture to give them, especially with Memorial Day coming up. And when I look at this picture, not only is there a soldier on it, and the soldiers, like it says, all gave some and some gave all. But with him kneeling at the cross, we also have to remember that Jesus died for us, and he gave his all just for us because he loves us so much. But I really love how this picture turned out, and I hope you liked it as well. So friends, let's take another view of the earlier projects in my video today, and in the comments below, let me know which is your favorite. So once again, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel and become part of our family. And I will see you in our next video. Have a great week.